In the headlines this evening, President Park Geun-hye is firm on her stance that there will be no tax hike. She says the government needs to find a way to offer better welfare with the lowest burden on the public. A local Japanese media outlet reports that Tokyo is planning to wrap up the process of revising the country's constitution by fall next year. And with the help of other countries, the leaders of Russia and Ukraine agreed to meet this week for peace talks. We have these stories and more coming right up. Stay with us. Hello and welcome everyone. This is Early Edition at 6, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Jaein.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us.
Well, amid the ongoing debate about raising or not raising taxes to finance the nation's welfare programs, President Park Geun-hye says the problem can be solved without increasing taxes.
But unfortunately, her stance is becoming an electromagnet for criticisms coming from all corners: the opposition, the public, and possibly even her own party. Our Kim Young-gil starts us off.
President Park Geun-hye has voiced her opposition to raising taxes in order to fund welfare programs. She said Monday that economic revitalization is the key to making up for any revenue shortfall for welfare, and that it will also help create jobs and raise tax revenue.
경제 활성화를 위해서 최선을 다하지 않고 이 세수가 부족하니까 뭐 이렇게 국민에게 세금을 더 걷어야 된다 하면은 그것이 우리 그 정치 쪽에서 국민에게 할 수 있는 소리냐.
Since Park's administration came into office in 2013, her government has been dogged by questions about whether it could deliver on a key campaign pledge to provide expensive welfare programs without raising taxes. She has even drawn criticism from her own ruling Saenuri party, which views her stance on the issue as unrealistic. Critics argue that the government is trying to squeeze more money out of ordinary wage earners. In recent months, the government has raised cigarette prices and introduced a revised tax settlement scheme, drawing fire for both from the general public. Adding fuel to the fire, the main opposition party's newly elected chairman, Jaein, vowed to fight against President Park's policies on his first day in the post.
I will stand against President Park Geun-hye's hidden motives to raise the taxes of ordinary citizens. I will go against plans to limit welfare expansion.
Moon pledged to raise the corporate tax rate and withdraw tax cuts for the rich in order to establish what he described as a fair tax system. The ruling party responded by saying it will gather opinions from inside the party and continue to communicate with the opposition party on tax-related issues. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The presidential office of Cheongwade says the president is planning to carry out a mini cabinet reshuffle shortly after Prime Minister nominee Lee Won-gu is appointed, but it might be a while before that shuffle or reshuffle takes place, with Lee's fate unclear as of now. For this report, here is Arirang News' presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-sun.
President Park's decision to complete reshuffles after her prime minister nominee is approved by parliament shows she plans to take into account both the public and ruling party sentiments. According to the presidential office spokesperson, the shakeups now expected after the parliament votes on the prime minister nominee on Thursday will be limited. While Yoo Gi-jun, a ruling party lawmaker close to the president, is a widely talked about candidate for Oceans Minister, the Unification Minister is also speculated to be replaced. But the future of Prime Minister nominee Lee Won-gu is uncertain after local media reported an audio file of the nominee claiming to have blocked media coverage questioning his eligibility as Prime Minister.
We had not expected this. Since the appointment will be about the nominee's qualifications, we need to come together to overcome this hurdle.
Lee also faces a series of allegations, including real estate speculation and his son having sought military service exemption by having a knee surgery.
The nominee has failed to clarify any of the allegations made against him, and now we've seen his crooked way of thinking that he can control the media. The nominee is not qualified to be appointed prime minister.
If Lee fails to win parliamentary approval, it will deal a heavy blow to the Park administration as it seeks to focus on revitalizing the economy entering its third year. And the presidential office's relationship with the ruling party, which has called for reforms in the administration, will also depend on whether the presidential chief of staff will be dismissed and who will be named as the president's new political advisors. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
The nation's main opposition Liberal Party now has a new leader. The former presidential candidate Moon Jae-in faces many obstacles, however, as he looks to eradicate sub-party factions. Our National Assembly correspondent Park Geun-hye has more.
The new leader of Korea's main opposition party, Moon Jae-in, paid his respects to three former presidents, Lee Seung-man, Park Geun-hye, and Kim Dae-jung on Monday, the day after his election.
I'm paying my respects to signify my commitment to ending the discord and bringing about national unity.
The new chairman of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party also had some words of advice for the Park Geun-hye administration, urging it to choose the path of reconciliation and integration.
There are many things the Park administration has done that run counter to national unity. For example, its extreme bias and discrimination in her personnel appointments.
Moon's election as the new opposition party leader is expected to deepen the confrontation between the nation's ruling and opposition camps. In his acceptance speech on Sunday, the former presidential candidate, who was once the former chief of staff for the late President Roh Moo-hyun, vowed to be a strong voice of opposition against the incumbent administration. In response, ruling Assembly Party Chairman Kim Moo-sung stressed political coexistence over confrontation in his meeting with the new opposition leader on Monday.
Politics is all about negotiation and compromise, and what people want is win-win politics for both political camps.
The new opposition party leader now faces the huge task of revamping a party plagued with deep-rooted factional strife before the by-elections this year and the general election next year. All eyes will now be on Moon as he takes his first steps. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, I remember a time several decades ago when I had to steal the remote control from my parents or grandparents when they were compulsively shopping from home shopping channels because they were very, trustworthy products back then, but things have changed quite considerably.
Right, there have been upgrades and home shopping channels they do offer great deals, and they are essential sales outlets for small and mid-sized firms. Our Song Ji-sun takes a look at the big picture today on this week's Industry Insight.
This thread-and textile company founded half a century ago was once facing a crisis. It was battling cheap Chinese imports while struggling to find a new retail outlet. But now it has transformed itself into a fast fashion producer, and its products are sold on two major TV home shopping channels. Its television sales are more than 10 times what it's raised through offline sales.
We are a traditional manufacturing company and couldn't afford all the marketing expenses needed to advertise our products. So we ventured onto home shopping channels that helped us gain wide recognition in a short period of time.
Many small and mid-sized companies like this have turned their products into household names through home shopping channels. There have been many changes in the past 2 decades since home shopping channels first launched in Korea. The channels now offer practically everything under the sun, and the format has also evolved over time.
Korea's home shopping industry has created a unique business model. Unlike the kinds of short infomercials you might see in other countries, Korean home shopping channels manage to keep the viewers watch the shows for a full hour by making them entertaining.
It's not just celebrities advertising the products, but ordinary people testing them with industry professionals. Korea's home shopping format of featuring a single product has also captured viewers overseas, especially in Asia. 4 Korean channels, mostly run by large conglomerates, have entered 10 countries over the past decade. And this leading channel is now seeking to expand its sales overseas to become the world's #1 home shopping distributor by 2020.
We've reduced the risks by entering the market through joint ventures, and we established an international outsourcing company to customize our product line. We also focus on introducing Korean products by smaller companies because it is harder for them to enter foreign markets than larger companies can.
In fact, over 70% of Korean products sold overseas through the channel are by small and mid-sized companies, creating a new Korean wave of products. Government regulators say home shopping companies' move into foreign markets could also help improve market issues here at home, like the high commission taken by the stations.
Expanding their overseas business could improve their profits as domestic market growth is slowing down, whereas foreign markets are just booming. This could also make room for domestic home shopping channels to lower their commission rates, which stand as an entry barrier for small and mid-sized companies.
The government will also launch a new public home shopping channel in the first half that will be solely dedicated to handling the products of small and mid-sized companies in its bid to help startups use home shopping channels to introduce their products. 송지선, Arirang News.
Business Park face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
For 5 straight years, the tax burden on Korean households has risen at a faster pace than household income. On the contrary, though, the country's corporate taxes are decreasing. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
The tax burden for Korean households outpaced income gains by nearly double in the first 3 quarters last year. Data from Statistics Korea shows the average monthly income of a household with more than 2 members stood at around $4,000, up more than 3.5% from a year ago. But households' average monthly spending on taxes rose almost 6% to around $140. The trend of households' tax burden increasing at a faster pace than their income has been an ongoing issue since 2010. And because tax expenditures exclude indirect taxes like value-added dues that households pay as they spend money to buy products, the actual tax burden on them is heavier. It's no surprise then that national income tax revenues collected mostly from ordinary citizens are on the rise. Korea's national income tax revenue has risen for the past 2 years since 2012, while corporate tax revenues were on a downward trend during the period. Although the government points to the sluggish economy at home and abroad for the low corporate tax revenues, experts say it should seek ways to create tax equity. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Now, falling global oil prices are having a mixed impact on Korea's economy, but one group that's hurting for sure is the construction firms targeting overseas clients. As the majority of their business is in the Middle East, the negative impact is not likely over yet. Shin Se-min tells us more.
Korean overseas construction industry is hurting after seeing its earnings fall for the first time in 4 years. The Bank of Korea says the current account surplus from overseas construction dropped to $17 billion last year, down 16% from the previous year. It's the first drop since 2010 when earnings fell nearly 18%. The balance of overseas contracts includes the payments that Korean builders have received for the progress made on existing orders from overseas. The decline in revenue is largely attributed to falling global oil prices, as a large portion of Korean construction firms are located in oil-producing countries in the Middle East. Experts say the oil price drop will be a troubling factor for many Korean builders looking for overseas deals, as it is hard to predict how long the current low oil prices will last. Korea's overseas construction industry has seen steady growth since 2010, from nearly $12 billion that year to $20 billion in 2013. The data says that the number had been rising by a yearly average of 20%.
Korean builders, however, secured $66 billion in overseas construction projects last year alone, the second highest total in history, but still short of the government's initial target of $70 billion. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The United States has reiterated that it welcomes dialogue with North Korea only when the regime is serious about getting back to denuclearization. Speaking to reporters in Seoul on Monday, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken said it is important to sustain international solidarity in pressuring North Korea on the question of deploying the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, missile system on the Korean peninsula. He said there is no decision nor active discussions on the issue with the South Korean government. This is Blinken's first overseas trip as the Deputy Secretary of State and the third visit to South Korea by a senior U.S. official in recent weeks. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is reportedly giving shape to how his party plans to revise the constitution. Items subject to amendment will be chosen during the regular session with the goal of passing the final bill by next fall. Our Son Jung-in has more.
The Japanese government is moving forward with its efforts to revise the country's pacifist constitution. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party's headquarters for the promotion of revision to the constitution is expected to work on its selection of items on the agenda for constitutional amendment during the current regular session of the Diet. They plan to finalize it no later than this fall. The party then plans to submit the constitutional amendment bill at the regular session in January next year. And after the House of Councillors election next summer, they plan to put the bill in motion during the extraordinary session in fall 2016. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says the party will devote all of its energy to gain control of 2/3 of the seats in the House of Councillors election so it can swiftly move from a vote in the Diet to a public referendum in 2 years' time.
We must win the majority of the votes at the public referendum. This is our top priority.
Abe's government also plans to include other items on the agenda for constitutional amendment that are closely related to the people's lives, such as environmental rights and fiscal health, to win more public support. But a tough road lies ahead for Abe and his party, as its coalition partner, New Komeito, is deeply against the move. And according to a recent opinion poll, more than 2/3 of the Japanese public are skeptical about the planned changes. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Another story related with Japan. Last week, we reported on a group of American historians protesting against Japan's efforts to water down historical facts. Well, now the U.S. government says it supports the scholars, saying Tokyo needs to change the way it approaches its past wartime atrocities. With more, here's our Connie Kim.
The U.S. government has lent its support to a group of U.S. historians who have been protesting Japan's attempts to whitewash history. The State Department told Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency Sunday that it strongly supports academic freedom as part of the foundation of a democratic society. It urged Tokyo to approach its historical wrongdoing through healing and reconciliation. Now, this comes after a group of 19 historians issued a joint statement expressing opposition to Japan's efforts to pressure U.S. publisher McGraw-Hill to change how the sexual slavery issue is described in one of its textbooks. Historians estimate that 200,000 women, mostly Koreans, were forced by the Japanese army to serve in military brothels during World War II. A collective statement by history scholars is seen as unusual, and it's expected to put pressure on Abe during his upcoming trip to the U.S. this spring. The trip will be Abe's first U.S. visit in about 2 years, and experts say he'll try to use it as an opportunity to deepen Tokyo's alliance with Washington. Abe also wants to push ahead with efforts to revise the country's pacifist constitution and give the country the right to collective self-defense, in other words, to allow the Japanese military to aid allies under attack. Experts say another item on Abe's to-do list is to complete the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal that would strengthen Japan-U.S. economic cooperation in the region. But with the U.S. pushing to restore trilateral security cooperation between South Korea and Japan, analysts say it seems that Tokyo will be left with no choice but to address its past wrongdoing in order to move forward with what Japan has on its agenda. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
European leaders have reached a date for talks on resolving the Ukraine crisis diplomatically. If things go as planned, the leaders of Russia and Ukraine will sit down in Belarus this week. Lee Ji-yoon has more.
A diplomatic push over the weekend to find a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine crisis has produced a summit date. The leaders of Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and France have agreed to meet in Minsk on Wednesday to discuss a potential peace plan amid ongoing fighting in eastern Ukraine. The four leaders held a telephone conference call on Sunday, 2 days after German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President François Hollande traveled to Moscow for face-to-face talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said he was hopeful the meeting would lead to a swift and unconditional ceasefire in eastern Ukraine, where pro-Russian separatists found success in seizing new territory in recent weeks. But President Putin said the talks would only happen if an agreement is reached on a number of points, pointing out that Kiev must halt its military operations in eastern Ukraine and stop putting pressure on rebel-held regions. This as heavy fighting continues in a strategic town in eastern Ukraine. Some 170 civilians escaped to Ukraine's capital of Kiev on Sunday, while hundreds of vehicles were seen crossing into the Russian border. More than 5,300 people have been killed since fighting between Ukrainian forces and Russia-backed rebels began in April of last year. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
It's winter wonderland in spring here in Korea, in Seoul especially. Snowmageddon, can I use that term right now?
I don't know. Well, it is piling up and it's rush hour, so you can imagine how bad the road conditions are at the moment and are going to be for the next couple of hours.
So unless you're trying to rush to the hospital, I say you should be really careful and slow down and get to wherever you're going in one piece. And we have our Michelle standing by at the Weather Center to give us some tips for safe driving on snowy roads. Michelle?
Happy Monday, guys. The snow has been coming down pretty hard here in the capital, and the roads are already slippery with melted snow. Now, these are mostly common sense, but there are 5 simple tips to keep in mind when you're driving in the snow so that makes you go home safely. Now, switching back to the weather, due to a cold high-pressure front weakening, snow clouds have been formed over in the west part of the sea, which is why we're currently getting all this amount of snow across the country. Now, Chuncheon, the province and other regions in the south will get up to 1 centimeter of powder, so be careful out there. Now, looking at the forecast for this week, we can expect temperatures to recover back to its seasonal average, and that will stay the same throughout this whole week. Now let's take a look at the readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Tuesday morning at -3 and gets up to 6 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will both top to 11 degrees. And to other regions, Jeju-An gets up to 9, Dokdo hits 6, while Mangungang drops low to -4 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Thank you for that, Michelle. That does it for us. Have a great start to your day or a safe drive home, depending on where you're tuning in from. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Na-hyun Kyung from the both of us and the rest of the team in Seoul. Thanks for watching. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.